on Jerusalem Dateline. This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Iran and the U.S. keep up their war of words. Many wonder if war did break out, how strong is Iran's military?
The Iranian method of irregular warfare combines political activity with military activity.
Plus, an arsonist destroys a major Christian ministry's television studio in Jerusalem.
So these ashes be raised up and proclaim the glory of God.
And a team of Israelis brew beer from yeast thousands of years old. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. White House officials are getting briefed on a Pentagon plan to send more troops to the Middle East. This amid growing threats from Iran and the administration working to calm war fears on Capitol Hill. Gary Lane has details.
U.S. Central Command made the request for more U.S. troops in response to attack threats from Iran. The Pentagon's plan proposes sending 10,000 to the Middle East for defensive purposes. It comes just days after President Trump ordered B-52 bombers and the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group to the region.
Our biggest focus at this point is to prevent Iranian miscalculation. We do not want the situation to escalate. This is about deterrence, not about war.
Senator Lindsey Graham says the move shows the United States is ready to respond if needed to protect American lives and U.S. vital interests in the region.
The best thing to happen is for everybody to calm down and Iran to back off, and I'm hoping that this show of force will result in de-escalating, not escalating.
Many Middle East experts say it's unlikely war would break out now, but the situation does raise the question in case of any future war. The question is, just how strong is Iran's military? President Trump fired the latest salvo in the war of words.
We have no indication that anything's happened or will happen, but if it does, it will be met, obviously, with great force. We'll have no choice.
An Iranian general fired back and tweeted, "We will give a crushing response to any aggression by our enemies." But are Iranian military threats like these credible or just bluster?
Conventionally, Iran is actually quite weak. The reason the Islamic Republic of Iran has posed a threat to U.S. interests in the Middle East and to allied security in the Middle East for so long is because it is an asymmetric military powerhouse.
Iranian expert Behnam Taleblu says Iran uses asymmetrical warfare through terrorism, proxies, and intimidation.
Bloviating, hyperbole are actually core elements of Iran's security policy. Why? Again, because the Islamic Republic of Iran is hyper-cognizant of its own conventional military deficiencies. And when Iran knows it can't win the battle of capabilities, it looks to win the battle of resolve.
Middle East expert Jonathan Spire says Iran's strength lies in its proxies throughout the region, like the Palestinian Islamic Jihad that recently launched hundreds of missiles into Israel.
They have this array of political military organizations, many Hezbollahs, so to speak, of which Lebanese Hezbollah was the prototype, across the region, very committed, very well indoctrinated, sometimes well trained, who are available for military tasks.
One flashpoint for Iran's asymmetric warfare is the capability to close the Strait of Hormuz, where much of the world's oil passes through, just off the coast of Iran.
It's exceptionally vulnerable. However, Iran doesn't have the capability to keep the strait closed. It has the ability to block it, and the U.S., through overwhelming military superiority, could open it.
The one military arena Iran holds an edge is its ballistic missile program.
This is, again, an exceptionally important area because multiple U.S. directors of national intelligence have said that Iran has the largest arsenal of ballistic missiles in the entire Middle East.
Given both its strengths and weaknesses, Iran balances its hot rhetoric with cool, calculated geopolitical moves that still make it a formidable adversary in the most dangerous region in the world. Well, here in Israel, wildfires rage during a major heat wave. Police ordered the evacuation of several communities in the country's center and south. Firefighters battled brush fires along the Gaza border, near Ben Gurion International Airport and outside Jerusalem. And officials even closed the major Tel Aviv-Jerusalem highway to traffic because of the fires. Israel and the region are in the grip of a major heat wave, with temperatures around the country reaching 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit and even higher. Well, here in Jerusalem, police are investigating another fire. the firebombing of a Christian TV studio. So far, police don't have any suspects in the firebombing of the Daystar Television Network's facilities. While the attack destroyed its new studio, Daystar plans to rebuild. The fire began early Saturday morning when an arsonist started a fire in the Daystar studio. Daystar was in the midst of a major renovation and upgrade of its studio here in Jerusalem, overlooking Mount Zion and the Temple Mount. The fire destroyed the new work and much of the existing facility.
The control room is, I'd say, probably totally devastated.
Dave Charette, the general contractor overseeing the renovations, showed us the destruction.
This is where we filmed from. There were 4 cameras that would be back in this area here, and Marcus and Joni would be, or their interviewee would be sitting here, and then you have this fabulous view behind them.
Yeah. These before and after shots reveal the extent of the devastation.
We're here in the new Daystar TV studios in Jerusalem, Israel.
Marcus and Joni Lamb dedicated the Daystar Jerusalem studio in October of 2009. Daystar is one of the largest Christian television networks in the world that reaches more than 200 countries and nearly 700 million people with its programs. Daystar was in the home stretch of its construction.
We just started with the construction of it, putting things back, getting the electric in place, and getting the walls built, and so we can meet our June 1st deadline, and then this happened.
Even in the midst of the destruction, Charette believes God is at work.
I believe that God has a reason and a purpose, and at the very least, He'll redeem what has happened here. So these ashes will be raised up, and proclaim the glory of God.
Daystar pledges to continue their Jerusalem operations and asks for prayer for continued protection. Coming up, hear from a moderate Muslim who says the West needs to wake up to the dangers of radical Islam. Ever since 9/11, moderate Muslims have been warning the West about the dangers of radical Islam. Here's an alarming interview CBN's George Thomas did with an imam after the recent terror attacks in Sri Lanka, who is telling the West, "We told you so."
As Sri Lankan authorities worry about the potential of more suicide attacks by the group behind the Easter Sunday bombings, one newspaper has published an exhaustive study of all the Islamic terror attacks around the world since 9/11. According to the German newspaper Die Welt, Islamic extremists have carried out 31,222 attacks in the past 18 years. Those attacks have killed 146,811 people around the world. Most of the victims have been Muslim. The list concludes with the recent attacks in Sri Lanka that killed at least 253 people and injured more than 500 when suicide bombers targeted churches and hotels on the island nation. Joining me to discuss the impact of those sobering numbers is Muhammad Tawhidi. He's a third-generation Iranian-born Australian Muslim and author of The Tragedy of Islam, Admissions of a Muslim Imam. Mr. Tawhidi, thank you so much for coming on the show. The research shows the geography of Islamist terror stretches today from Europe to the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. How do we combat the scourge of radical Islamic terrorism?
Firstly, in order for us to combat and tackle this wave of terrorism, we need to understand that the definition of terrorism that we use is different from that of the jihadists. The jihadists do not believe that what they are doing is wrong. They believe it is noble to blow themselves up, and therefore there is a clash in understanding in what exactly is going on. Firstly, they do not need an actual government or a geographic location to establish a caliphate. They target areas with weak intelligence and governments that are paying attention to other issues such as political correctness, and they infiltrate and drive their agenda in these areas.
The world saw new images of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi this week as he warned followers that the battle of Islam against the Crusaders is a long battle, he said. Do we know how to fight this battle, and are we prepared to engage in sort of the long haul of this battle?
Well, your question is, do we know how to fight this battle? Of course we know how to fight this battle, but are we prepared to take on this battle? we can fight this battle, and it's very easy. We deport every extremist imam in the country. We cancel visas of people coming in from Iran and Saudi Arabia to preach hatred in this coming month of Ramadan to the West. And we stop the construction of new mosques without vetting the people behind them, and stop foreign funding from Islamist countries. And unfortunately, Europe is being run by governments that do not care about their Christian heritage and Christian religion. They don't care about anything that's happening. All they want to do is rule and stay in power, and they use the political correctness machine to do so.
Is that going to be the death of our societies around the world?
It is the current beginning of the death. It's already happening. There are areas in France where Christians cannot walk freely. President Macron has come out saying that the Islamist movements want to secede from France. This is a leader of a country telling you that he has lost control. He's admitting finally that he has lost control. There are serious agendas being played in that region. Look, I am a Muslim, but I cannot live in an Islamist theocracy. I can live in a Christian government based on their constitution, because that is where peace lies. I can't live in a place where ISIS rules the area. That's no Muslim with a brain that works would want to live under ISIS, right? And when we come to the West trying to warn the governments and intelligence agencies about what is happening, about the people we fled from, we have this new political correctness agenda that tells us, oh, we're the racist, we're the ones who are traitors, and the extremists needs to be understood and embraced, and they have a point, let's listen to them. And sooner or later they're in parliament, they're in government, and there you go in America, you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib changing the narrative in Washington that is now affecting the whole, influencing and affecting the narrative around the world, attacking Jews, attacking Christians, and this is just the beginning. So if Christians don't wake up, Christian leaders don't wake up, then we Muslims who fled from extremists can't help you anymore. We tried warning you.
ISIS may have lost their self-styled caliphate in Iraq and Syria, but they are still a threat in many countries, right?
It's not self-styled caliphate, it's a real caliphate. This is the true extremist Islamist militant ideology that is taking over our lands and our countries. And you see, with one attack, they took 300 lives in Sri Lanka, injured over 500 people. This is not a so-called caliphate. This is a caliphate in action, and we need to treat it as a caliphate in action, take it seriously, and drive them to the ground.
Up next, the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. Much more than a meal, it's become a movement. Take a look and see where it's going now. A new bill pending approval by the Irish government is just 1 or 2 steps from becoming law. If passed, the legislation could have profound consequences for Irish citizens. The proposed law would make it illegal for Irish citizens to buy goods and services from Israeli citizens in what they define as the occupied territories. That would make it illegal to buy an ice cream, a postcard, or a bottle of water here in the old city of Jerusalem.
We bought ice cream and we bought water, and we bought it here in the old city next to Jaffa Gate. And if this bill passes, then what we just did would be illegal.
Irish citizens Karen and Norman Ivers, along with their twins, Natalie and Nathaniel, visit Israel often.
Well, it's an infringement of our freedoms. I just hope that it won't hurt anybody, and that it won't hurt Ireland.
The bill is called the Control of Economic Activity in Occupied Territories. If it becomes law, an Irish citizen convicted for violating it could be fined more than $250,000 and spend up to 5 years in jail.
The proposed Irish law is the most extreme anti-Israel legislation proposed anywhere outside of the Arab League. If you come to the Holy City and you buy some holy water, if you buy some Jewish prayer shawl or religious books, bring them back to Ireland, bang, jail.
International law expert Professor Eugene Kontorovich calls the bill radical.
What's shocking about this law is its clearly discriminatory nature. So they say, we consider this occupied territory, we have a problem with occupied territories. But other than the fact that it's actually not occupied territory, the law does not apply to any other people or group other than Jews here in their biblical homeland.
One Israeli legal organization produced this YouTube video to raise awareness.
We met the nice couple, Karen and Norman, and we decided to help them and to do something about this and make the world kind of understand better of how ridiculous this whole situation is potentially.
We love Israel. We're Christian Zionists, and we support the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. And we think this bill is unfair, and we wanted our voices to be heard.
One of the only reasons the law has not been passed yet is because the Irish government is properly worried about the consequences it's going to have for Irish companies doing business in America and many of the large American companies like Apple that do business in Ireland. Because America has strict laws against boycotting Israel.
In the meantime, the Ivors hope their next visit to Jerusalem won't land them in jail. Ireland is just one example of how the nations of the world are making decisions about Israel and the city of Jerusalem. One movement that began here in Jerusalem 3 years ago is reaching out to the nations with a different message about Israel and how it can be a blessing. I talked about this with Albert Wexler, the director of the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and Jack van der Tong of Pillar of Fire Ministries. Albert and Jack, thanks for being with us on Jerusalem Dateline with a great view of Jerusalem behind us and talking about the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. Albert, it's 3 years now. You're going to have your third annual breakfast in just a few days, the beginning of June. What's happened in the last 3 years?
Well, it's been more than we have expected. Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, when we gathered the first time on the 50th anniversary of reunification of Jerusalem and prayed for the peace of Jerusalem, it launched a movement. So we've had people come to us from all kinds of places, from London, from Accra, Ghana, from Uganda.
Tell us about Uganda. That was a special breakfast there.
See, the president was supposed to be our keynote speaker at dinner, but then he changed his mind and he sent his prime minister to read his speech. Then we had the first lady come during the breakfast, and then the president was kind enough to send his helicopter to pick us up and take us to meet with him in the north of the country. So we had some very, very important meetings. We were very surprised by the response we had in Uganda.
Jack, there's another one coming up at the end of June, June 25th and 26th. Yes. At The Hague. Why is this breakfast so unique and special?
Because the connection with Jerusalem is very close, and I'm so happy that we work together now. And you know that in the scripture, Isaiah 2, that the law will go out from Zion. And now my city is saying that the law is going out from The Hague. So we believe that these connections and what we are going to do with the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast and working with Albert and his team is that we believe that this is so close to the restoration of Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah.
Why should people be there?
I believe that a lot of people don't understand how important The Hague is. If you talk about that The Hague is the city of justice and peace, that Ban Ki-moon and the UN and the nations in the world say that The Hague is the city where the law will go out, that this is the city. And we believe that if you read the scriptures, that Jerusalem will be that city. So the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is so important to pray for the restoration. And what's so interesting is that we have permission to visit the Peace Palace with the people of the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. And the Peace Palace, it's the highest court of the UN. Nobody knows it, but the original name is the Temple of Peace. So it's not only law, there is also religious things going on. And if you think about that in 2020, the world leaders of all the religions, the Pope, from the Buddhism and Hindus, the leaders are coming and to sign a covenant in that building. And we are allowed to enter this building.
So are we seeing a great contrast between what man has planned at The Hague and what God has planned here in Jerusalem?
Amen. That's it. Yes, that's it. Exact.
So Albert, where are we going from here? You're going to have your third Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. Do you see this even growing even more?
It is growing, and of course our goal is to mobilize the church to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. As Isaiah prophesied, I have placed watchmen on your walls, Jerusalem, that they would not give God's silence and that they would continue in their prayers until Jerusalem is made a praise in the earth. And we want to see this movement touch every nation. We want to see that people would come to the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, but also that we could bring the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast to these different cities and lift up God's word and pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Tell us, why people should come to see you at The Hague.
The uniqueness of The Hague, there is no city in the world who has in a way stolen the promises of Jerusalem, and we want to restore the promises back to Jerusalem. We are going to 3 unique locations, and to have there the Jerusalem prayer breakfast, it will be unique. I have visited some of the Jerusalem prayer breakfast. I think this is different than all the other ones.
And Albert, final thought, is there another biblical principle at work? Genesis 12:2, those that bless Israel will be blessed.
Yeah, these are the cornerstones. It's a two-way street, because if the nations come and they bless the seed of Abraham, they bless Israel, that's the way how the blessing will come to them. And the blessing will come when people want to get involved, want to invest, want to bless Israel, not by siding with our enemies and cursing and isolating Israel. I think it's a unique moment in the history. Never before has there been a call coming out of the Knesset to come and pray for Jerusalem, for the peace of Jerusalem. It almost feels like the nations are at the scales, and the decisions are being made on which side of the truth the nations will stand in the history.
Well, as you say, quite a time in history right now. Albert and Jack, thank you for being with us. Look forward to seeing you in Jerusalem and also in The Hague. Up next, see how an Israeli team brought yeast thousands of years old back to life into a neighborhood pub. How would you like to drink a beer that came from yeast thousands of years old? That's what a team of Israeli researchers did, and the results could have benefits far beyond just a glass of beer.
No, this has never been done before. They have never successfully isolated ancient yeast, or for that matter, any ancient organism, a microorganism, from an ancient archaeological context. They've done this from things from recent times, but never from something so old. And this opens up a whole new field in archaeological research, because there may be possible in the future to identify various microorganisms from various archaeological contexts and vessels, and perhaps recreate ancient cheese, ancient wine, ancient beer, ancient pickles, all kinds of things that are produced using microorganisms. Excellent.
That beer is just one more sign of the innovation coming out of Israel. Well, that's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline. On Jerusalem Dateline.